welcome back into the studio. I thought on this video I'd share some tips and techniques from my 2-hour tiger video, including how to stop those stripes smudging. Okay, so let's jump right in and see how I did it in pastels. Now first of all, I transferred my drawing over to my pastel matte paper. I'm using my current favourite light blue, and you can see it's a bit more of a grey. I love to work on a mid-tone because then the darks show up and the lights show up. Now very often when I've got a subject that's got stripes, to prevent smudging, because if I just put down the black marks, the black pencil or pastel stick at this stage, you see the black stripes. If I went over the top with more pencil, or even more so when I'm using what I normally use for underlayers, pan pastels, those stripes would smudge. So I'd either have to draw around them or be very careful, you know, going over them, but they would smudge. So normally I would do the stripes with quite thin black gouache paint. When that dries, it's stuck there and it won't wipe away. But the brilliant thing is with the gouache, because it dries perfectly matte, I can put pastel on top, and you see that in many of my other videos. For this demonstration, I wanted to keep supplies down to a bare minimum, so just a piece of pastel matte paper and pastel pencils, okay, nothing more. So I used a different technique to seal the black. I put the stripes in with black pastel pencil, and this time I used Clairefontaine freezer spray, and that means it's froze and sealed those stripes to the paper surface. I can rub the surface, they're not going to move at all. And now you'll see how easily and freely I can apply my pastels over the top and the black marks won't smudge. Okay, so that's a quick tip how not to get those black marks smudging. If I'm doing an underlayer with pastel pencils, I use the pencils on this side, as you can see in the video, at a really shallow angle. I don't want defined hard edge marks for an underlayer, and this is allowing me to deposit quite a lot of pastel in a short amount of time. I usually use pan pastels for the underlayer these days just because they're so quick, easy and effective to use, but you can always use pastel sticks or pastel pencils as I'm showing here. Now notice on the paper we've got kind of a grittiness, a texture that we're seeing on the areas that I'm applying the pastel. Now I want those areas to look really smooth, and that means I need to get that pastel that's currently sitting on the surface pushed down into the surface of the paper, and I do that using a paper stump. But you could always use a pan pastel, a small applicator, sponge or tool as well to do it. And in a similar way to how I held the pastel pencil, I'm once again holding the paper stump at a very shallow angle. Just small circular strokes, side to side strokes, really doesn't matter, but you can clearly see how smooth the pastel gets, and then I can apply more pastel on top. Okay, so the whole idea of the underlayer is to get this kind of a blurry, fuzzy map for me to follow, where I can refine and detail on top of. Now because I put those black markings in place and sealed them, I can still see them through the underlayer, and that makes it much easier for me to know that they're going in the right place. And all it is then is just a case of using a black pencil, or maybe even a really dark brown pencil first and then going over with black, to just re-establish and indicate where those markings are. So that initial time I spent to seal that drawing, that was time really well spent, and it makes all these other details and refinements of the stripes on top so much easier and quicker to do. Now the thing that normally separates a complete beginner's artwork, novice artwork, to somebody that's more advanced with more experience is the subtleties of colour and tonal value that you see in the drawing. Now even in these black stripes, I've gone around the outside with quite a rich warm brown, because I saw that in the reference photo, and that's going to really help with the lighting effect that's going to be in this area, and that feeling, as I said, of more subtle colours, and that the artist has got more experience. So always really study your reference photo, looking for these unusual colours that you may not expect in those areas. Now, the thing I love most about pastel pencils and pastels in general is that we can put a light on top of a darker underlayer within reason. Okay, you don't want anything too dark if you put in something very bright on top, but as you can see here, I'm quite easily putting these lighter greys on top of that underlayer, and that makes the whole process of fur so much more intuitive, but even better than that, much faster as well. So a drawing like this took me around about 4.5 hours or so to complete, and because I've come from an oil painting background, as I said, it's very intuitive and natural for me to be able to apply light over dark. And that's how I build up layers of texture. I just gradually go lighter and lighter with each layer, and that gives the drawing much more of a sense of depth in the fur. Even a larger area like the background, I can still use just pencils if I want, but obviously when you're using pencils for large areas, they weigh down quicker. So once again, that might be a good time to use pan pastels, at least for the base, or pastel sticks, and just blend it in as I have here, and then I can come over the top, pick out some details, the small pebbles and grit on the floor, first with the darks, and then once again work in and put in the highlights on top to give it that more three-dimensional effect. Now, many artists are terrified of putting whiskers in because it comes at the very end, so they're worried about messing things up at the last stage. But a fairly sharp pencil, okay, rest your hands on some paper like I'm doing here so you don't smudge the underlayer, and a confident stroke lifting off at the end to make it taper right at the end. And if you're using softer pencils, you may well need to sharpen them a couple of times when you're doing the whiskers. So don't start off with a sharp pencil for the first 1 or 2 whiskers, and then as the nib of the pencil is getting worn down, the mark is going to get wider and wider. Okay, so make sure you've still got that sharp edge on the whiskers, and here I'm just pushing a little harder to get more pastel deposited and give me a whiter whisker. As I put in the final touches on the tiger drawing, remember, if you want to watch a really in-depth 2-hour version of this, it's over on my Patreon channel, and I'll leave some details at the end of the video for those interested. Just wanted to quickly mention my Patreon channel for those looking for even more in-depth art instruction. It's packed full of pastel videos, oil videos as well, and those videos are being added to new ones every single month. I have videos for the complete beginner that have never done pastels or oils before with just limited supplies, and I take you from the very first blocking in all the way through to the final detailed drawings and paintings. I've also got some really unusual subjects as well, and in all of my videos I always take you through all the details. You see everything I do, how I create my work. But it's not just for beginners, it's also for novices, and I also show the best artwork that I've ever done as well. And this particular elephant video spans 6 hours, so you know you're going to see tons and tons of details, tips and techniques. And as mentioned, I've got lots of oil videos on there too, so there really is something for everybody, and you get access to hundreds of hours worth of videos for just $4. Now over 1,000 members strong. Hope to see you there soon.